now have the pleasure of introducing Maciek Musialowski. He is going, excuse me.
You don't have to read all that stuff.
Oh, but this is the we wanna let him know. He's gonna be telling us about food forest movement, planting perennial polycultures for food, water, and resilience. Maciek has a master's master's degree in chemistry and experiential education. He spent a year and a half in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, living and breathing field-based environmental education. Yes, we love that experiential. That's what I meant to say. He has taught adolescents science and math in the field and in schools for 15 years in the Rocky Mountain states. He planted his orchard in spring of 2013 in Taos, New Mexico. Though initially self-taught, he finished a 72-hour permaculture design course in 2018. He began hosting food forest tours in 2020 and soon after shifted from K through 12 to focus on permaculture education. He founded the Food Forest Movement nonprofit in 2022. In addition, he is working on a food forest manual and a card curriculum aligning the pilot climate polycrisis with addictions. He is also an amateur passive solar home designer. Wowza! All right. Thank you so much, Maciek. If you have a question, please wait for me to get the microphone to you so that you can be recorded in your question. All you.
Thanks for introducing me and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yes. Or you have the red one right there.
Oh,
and you can either use the stand or, and then this will be the question and answer.
Checky. 1, 2, 3. Greetings. Thank you for all coming. Amazing event. So excited to be here. Been known about this for years. Scheduling children, farming, springtime. You know how it is. Okay, so Maciek Musialowski is me. Quick land acknowledgement. So the background of the food forest movement, the framework, is permaculture. Permaculture is not new, okay? This is something that people have been practicing for thousands and thousands of years, integrating growing and living systems between human beings and nature and learning how to mimic nature and perhaps giving her a little nudge from time to time. And people have stewarded this land and the lands all around us from many cultures for a long time. So just wanted to acknowledge that. I also wanted to acknowledge that I'm a learner. I grew up in New York City. To engineers, I studied chemistry, and yes, the environmental ed part, I always loved nature, but at my age, being the gray hair that I am, I feel like I still have so much to go. And the planting that you're about to see started in 2013, but there is so much more to learn, hence the wide variety of books here that are available. Okay. And there's one critical word that I really forgot to put in this title, and that is the idea of polycultures. So poly meaning many, cultures in this case meaning types of plants. The idea of a food forest is that we're planting many different species of plants in the same place. Let's see, do I have it here? No, I don't. Eric Toensmeyer wrote a book with his buddy called Paradise Lot, and it. Am I going to have to type in a password to get back in? I will keep talking while. So Paradise Lot. In it, he and his buddy bought a house with 1/10 of an acre of barren land in Boston and split it into a duplex and grew 300 species of perennials on 1/10 of an acre and were able to feed them and both of their honeys on 1/10 of an acre. So this idea of vast diversity and getting resilience through that. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to run through, I did a Pecha Kucha talk. How many people have been to a Pecha Kucha? Ooh, Pecha Kucha is a series of talks given 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide. That means every presenter has 6.5 minutes to tell their story. If you ever get to see a Pecha Kucha, it's a really cool experience. And so I had to tell my story in 6.5 minutes. So basically, I'm going to go through the majority of the Pecha Kucha, and then I made a list of other issues to talk about. We'll talk about them, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. All right. This is Africa. This is from Scientific American Magazine in 2006. Okay, and here's a woman and her children, and here's corn growing way, way, way above their heads. And this is an acacia tree. So an acacia tree is the equivalent of a locust tree in North America. It's the nitrogen-fixing tree. And so what you have is annuals growing underneath the canopy of a tree. Agroforestry, a food forest. Okay, so 7 layers of a food forest, ideally. You have canopy trees that are super tall. In our areas, those would be locust, black locust, box elder, maybe elm, semi-dwarf fruit trees in the understory. So these are, 12 to 10 to 20 feet tall. Shrubs down low that are perhaps producing berries or other, these don't all have to be yielding species. Herbaceous perennials that are growing a little bit bigger, but every year they drop and die all the way down to the ground over the winter, and then they pop back up in the spring. So we would call that an herbaceous perennial. Short ground covers, which, let's face it, not all ground covers are really short. Some of them grow quite a bit taller. Not only do we have root systems underneath here, but sometimes we have tubers. The classic tuber around here that I would say is Jerusalem artichoke. Yes, it makes you a little gassy, but man, it tastes good and it has a lot of calories, and it's fairly tough. Thank you. Medicinal properties galore. And then if you really want to go to town, you plant vines that crawl up the branches of these trees. The classic example I know that would be appropriate here would be grapes and apples. Okay, you can plant grapes underneath apple trees and they will, and then I don't have any data to show this, but the idea is that both benefit better together than they would be separately. The fancy word for that is synergy, right? We're seeking in permaculture and in food forests and in what these ancient cultures have done, they've been seeking synergy to do what Mother Nature does. Okay. This is 2003. This is an alfalfa field from my neighbor. They grow great alfalfa. We purchased this land, and this was all roses. We did a lot of work. Well, we paid somebody to do a lot of work to cut down and to pull out rose roots. And then every one of these is essentially a tree basin. And basically what you have is a smiley face, a semicircular berm here that's about a foot tall. We had to cut tons and tons of oak for the driveway for our property, for our land. And so here are piles and piles of mulch. And if you're going to buy a single book or read a single book about orcharding, it's Michael Phillips' The Holistic Orchard. And in it, he talks very clearly about the role of fungus among us. So folks, all plants on the planet, 90% of plants on the planet have associations with fungus, and almost all of them have associations with bacteria. But here's the difference. Woody species prefer more fungus than bacteria, right? Whereas grains and annuals prefer more bacteria than fungus. So what we want to do with a food forest, trees and shrubs, is to prepare fungally dominated soils. So being the sort of overambitious person that I am, I was thinking, okay, we're going to tear up the soil and we're going to mix in a lot of wood chips because they're available. And so we hired a bunch of young men, and I had laid this out already in a pattern, and we mixed in a lot of these wood chips into this soil and then inoculated with fungus. We call it mycorrhizal fungus. not micro, but myco, M-Y-C-O. So the prefix myco in Latin means mushroom. And let's see if I can spell this properly. But is it double Z or double H? Say it again. Mycorrhizal, I think double H. Mycorrhizal, something like that. Rhizome means root. Okay, so these are fungus that very specifically attach themselves to the roots of plants. You might think, so we call it symbiosis, right? Both benefit. So what does the tree get out of it? The tree gets increased surface area for water absorption and for mineral absorption. Okay, so all of the minerals, the calciums, the sodiums, the chlorines, the zinc, the copper, all these weirdos get attached and absorbed through the fungus towards the roots of the tree or the shrub. And what else they get is they get water. And you might say, well, what does the fungus get out of this? What only green plants can do, and that's produce sugar. Right? So it's a clear deal, and it's a great deal. Green plants are the only things, and green bacteria are the only things that can produce their own sugar. Everybody else steals sugar from other species by eating them and ingesting them. So, and this stuff, mycorrhizal fungus, comes in a powder. It comes in a bag. Can you produce your own? Yes, I was talking to Chaitanya today about how to do that. But you can buy it. It used to be super expensive. It's a little bit less expensive now. A pound bag is $40. But listen, 1 flat teaspoon per gallon of water, you can pour that directly on the roots of a tree, and you're rocking and rolling. Okay, so every single tree that was planted in the middle of every single one of these leveled, terraced basins that has a semicircular berm on the downhill side was prepared in advance. Yes, it's a lot of work with fungus and with fungus. Okay, so I had mapped this out. This is not hard to do, folks. You need string. Okay, 3 pieces of string the same length in a triangle gives you an equilateral triangle from school. And a hexagon, the way bees create their honeycombs, is the tightest that you can pack together circles. Well, guess what? Between there and there and there, that's an equilateral triangle. Between there and there and there is another equilateral triangle. So as long as you have 3 pieces of rope that are the same length, you can set this up. So here's the hexagon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 in the middle. Okay. Why did I set this up as a hexagon? Because I wanted shade. Okay, I wanted those trees at maturity for those crowns to be tickling each other so that a human being could walk through, and that's about it. I want as much shade as possible. I do have an acequia here in New Mexico. That's the Arabic word for an irrigation ditch. The road is actually up here where you see this white spot. The road is up here. The acequia runs just below it, and the water dumps out here. And so I irrigate coming water down from both sides, and we send water into each of these basins. Every one of these basins is below the next one by about 1 foot to 9 inches. Okay, and as you can see, when we prepped this year 1, not only did we mix wood chips into the soil, we covered the surface with wood chips. So here's my beloved co-parent. That is the height of the new tree, baby tree that was planted there, and this is all the initial cover crop that was suggested by Gordon Tooley from Truchas, who's been grafting apples and pears and stone fruit for 30 years. The basic formula is buckwheat, oats or rye, which is even more drought tolerant, field peas, sandfoin, and hairy vetch. Hairy vetch is my number one cover crop. It's very easy to germinate. It grows in mats. It doesn't really grow up that tall unless it has a scaffold to follow. But it germinates, it covers, it's nitrogen fixing. And so this is year one. I mean, you're creating soil. You are adding organic matter to that soil rapido. Oh, thank you. The proper spelling. 2 R's. H-R-H-I-Z-A-L. Only one H. And 2 R's. Okay. Come on, I'm an ex-teacher. I got to get this right. Okay. All right. So year 2, you're starting to move into adding perennials to your system. So what do we have? The number one perennial has to be comfrey. Comfrey comes in 2 versions. One, which will piss off your hayfield ranchers because it spreads. The other is a Russian variety that's hybridized and it's sterile. That one does not piss off your neighbors. So when you purchase this stuff, try to get the stuff that's sterile, that doesn't spread. Because if you take non-sterile comfrey and you get a pea-sized fingertip portion and you run it through with a tiller and you actually spray that stuff somewhere else, their entire field is going to be covered with comfrey. The beauty of comfrey is it's taprooted, and you can't see it right now. That's smooth brome grass. That's a non-native grass. It's ridiculously aggressive, has a very dense fibrous root system. This stuff grows up and over. I call these supportive perennials things that grow up and over. So comfrey, lovage, alfalfa, even chives, something that really will shade out the understory competition. What we have here are walking onions. That is lovage right there. That was planted probably year 2. This picture, this picture is not year 2. This picture is probably year 3 or year 4. But the point is that it's messy underneath here. This is not an English, sorry if I'm insulting an English people here, but it's not a straight, organized understory. It's meant to be chaotic and organic because we're trying to mimic Mother Nature, right? We're trying to follow the lessons that she's taught us about how plants like to grow. Okay. How do we know that fungus among us really works? So Suzanne Simard, Canadian professor, did her PhD thesis proving that if you have a mother tree of Douglas fir, she was working for foresters at the time, and they were like, no, you must cut down all the birch because the birch is competing with the Douglas fir, and we want as much lumber as possible. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And she proved it. She proved that not only do elder Douglas firs direct sugar towards their seedlings that are genetically related, but they also send sugar towards other species. This concept that we have in our brains, in our Western brains, about competition. I'm not saying that it never exists, but in forests and natural forests, it's way, way, way overdone. And so synergy is what we're looking for. This is a great read. It's quick and easy. It includes part of her personal story with her life. Really well integrated, a fabulous read. I can't recommend it more. I think she's got a new book coming out. Okay, so here's many years later. Here's an apple tree towards the end of the season with lots of apples. I have daylilies growing here. There's lovage over here. There's western sand cherry in here. I don't know if you see these daylily flowers. They are not only edible, they're not only beautiful, they're juicy and they're meaty. Like you can add them to a salad and you're going to be a happy camper. It's messy. It's organic. It's not meant to be beautiful. The daylilies might in New Mexico and Taos tend to kind of dry out towards the middle of summer. They come back. They come back. It's okay. I want to say something about the French. The French have known about terroir, the idea of terroir, for a long time. That all of the plants that are growing in and around a vineyard influence the taste of the grapes, which influences the taste of the wine. Okay? And so all of that taste of these apples is influenced by all of the other stuff that's growing in and around. And I'm not going to worry about tooting my horn. My apples are amazing. They're truly, truly tasty. All right, edible other products, because I differentiate between support species and yielding species. So these are walking onions. These are the fruiting stalks of walking onions. You can see the top sets a lot like the bulbils on garlic, but you can see based on the size of my body. I mean, these things are tall. And they produce quite a lot of food. You can put them in a blender and put them in a jar that has straight lines, that doesn't have, it's not tapered, so it doesn't crack the glass, and you can throw it in a freezer and you can cook it with, your soups all winter long. This is 9 years later. This is 9 years later. In the fall, this is one of those apple trees. Here is a honey locust that was planted after the fact, because I said, well, Maciek, you're 7 layers of a food forest. You've only got 5. What are you doing? So I said, all right, let's plant honey locust here. And then in this area here, I wanted to create some shade because this is where the trailer used to be. So we moved the trailer out. And I said, all right, in the afternoon, because the sun's over here in the west, I want afternoon shade to shade out this area. This tree is now like way up here somewhere. It's now grown taller than those apple trees. Remember, we have acequia irrigation, and remember that we started this in 2013. And so here we are 13 or 14 years later. The water regime has changed a little bit. But the bottom line is, my apple trees are this size. I cropped this photo specifically so that that's at the very bottom of the trunk of the tree. The edges are at the very edge of the tree, and the top of the photo is at the top of the tree. I would like you to notice that this distance is longer than this distance. 3/4 of all my strategies are to retain moisture. So pruning and shaping a tree to get it to shade out its own footprint as soon as possible is a key part of my strategy. Yeah? Oh yeah. We've got to keep these things topped essentially, and we're choosing side branches occasionally from time to time. If you don't talk to apple trees and pear trees, they will shoot for the sky, and it'll be unmanageable. It'll be unsafe. People get injured on fruit ladders. It's not unusual. So there are multiple reasons to do this. And by the way, now look at the shade down here. Even the color in this photo. I mean, the temperature down here is just, 10 degrees lower than it is if you were to step, 15 feet away from this food forest. So in order to do that, you got to do some training, and you got to do some pruning, and you want to do it young in the life of the tree, because these branches here, the ones that you choose to keep versus the ones that you choose to eliminate, they are going to be the scaffold, what we call scaffold branches of the tree for the rest of its life. Okay, branches don't go up with the tree, right? The tree grows up and adds branches up above it, but the branches that come out sideways stay in the same position. And if this is the center of a tree right here, and it's a semi-dwarf tree and it's 7.5 feet in radius, I never want a branch to be lower than this. I never want to have to do any more than this in order to get underneath that branch. So that means any branches that are lower than 1.5 feet here, they got to go. Okay, so we hold pruning and training workshops in the springtime. Okay, all this in contrast to a photo that I stole off the internet of a typical almond orchard somewhere, likely in California. Admittedly, this is not the middle of summer, so it's not green. But I want you to notice that there is a drip system here. There are some drip pipes, and there is some water coming out here. But all of this, there are tracks from tractors driving by, compacting the soil on either sides of these trees. And what are the paths for the tractors for? Pesticides and herbicides, right? And so these roots never have a chance to connect to the roots on the other side. And most likely this is a monoculture. I've got one general, maybe a few different varieties of almond trees or whatever. And I'm sorry, the taste is not going to be the same. The productivity isn't going to be the same. The health of the land isn't going to be the same. And you're going to be using a lot more water because all this water is evaporating under the hot California sun. Crazy. Okay, young trees need support. They need, in our part of the world, in Taos, they need windbreak. And here we are, we're lucky. The wind and the afternoon sun come from the same direction, from the west, right? There's a couple of spots that I've been to where the primary direction of the wind comes from the south. And it's like, what? We got to add extra windbreaks? Yes, we do. Okay, so this is at Veterans Off Grid, a group of veterans that are creating living spaces for veterans that aren't happy out in this sort of traditional capitalistic or industrial system. So we planted a small apple tree here. And this is straight out of Bill Mollison's permaculture textbook. There's post number 1, there's post number 2, there's post number 3. Any organic material that you can weave back and forth between 3 posts, boom, you've got windbreak. This material it doesn't even have to be organic, but it's easiest to find organic material. Branches, they don't have to be live willow. Yes, live willow is that needs to be trimmed in your spot is fantastic anyway, and you can make chopsticks from the thinner parts, which I have in my pack at all times. Highly recommend that folks make chopsticks out of willow so you can stop using the damn plastic forks when you go to the store. But really, any material whatsoever can be woven back and forth, but the key thing is they have to go back and forth. So one set goes this way, the next set goes that way, the next set goes this way, the next set goes that way. Otherwise, the posts do this sort of thing and the whole thing falls apart. Let's say you don't have material. Actually, I did put in 3 pieces of rebar here. Sometimes I go to rebar. If I'm dealing with clay soils that are really hard, and I buy a 2x2 4-foot post from Ace Hardware, and I hit it with a sledgehammer, and it's cracking the wood. Rebar is cheaper than meat per pound. A 20-foot stick of 3/8-inch rebar is like $8.99. You cut it into 4 pieces and you've got 5 feet of rebar. 1.5 goes in the ground, 3.5 feet. My hip is at exactly 3 feet. 3.5 feet is above ground. That's plenty of room to weave in some organic material. In this case, this is on the backside of an earthship, and they didn't have much organic material, so I put the posts in, but they did have some tires, so heck, we improvised. ¿Por qué no? Folks, we've got to direct water from roof catchments from anywhere we possibly can. This is at my daughter's school. So there's a young apple tree with the 3 posts waiting for a windbreak. And I just took a piece of PVC. I put a board over here so that, and put some rocks underneath. It's not rocket science. You just need to do it. Okay, this is my new place. It's much flatter. It's much more exposed and windier and drier. And so what we did is we created what's called a lazy river. Actually, I'm going to draw it on the black here. The idea is you are sending your irrigation path back and forth as slowly as possible. There are multiple ways to measure this. You don't need fancy equipment. The traditionals, the ancients, did it with an A-frame, right? An A-frame that's shaped like two pieces of wood. You put a third piece of wood, you put a string between them and hang a weight on the bottom. You calibrate it next to a stream, not a stream, but a lake where you know where something is level, or you do it back and forth and you can find the center mark and then you know when something is level. Yes, sir.
Just wondering what kind of irrigation or like water situation you have here where you're with free flow water year round.
Yep. The compuerta is right up here. All these flowering, these are wild plums that are flowing across the, this is not the mother ditch. This is one of the lateral ditches that comes off the Rio Fernando. And my water comes out right there. And
Out of the stream itself.
out of the irrigation ditch. It's an irrigation ditch, yeah. So we block off, we put in a piece of metal plate right there. We block off the water. The water rises and rises and rises, and then eventually it flows onto the land. It takes, thank you, Alvin, for all of your work, and that's Alvin, in creating all these. So what we would do is we block off some of these sections with sandbags and rocks, and what happens is it floods up above. So remember I said you go back and forth, right, where you get these little triangles. And so if you block off these spots with sandbags and or rocks, then generally the water starts to come up, and, you know, this entire thing gets flooded. Yes, sir. 7,000. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we need pollinators, right? So bees carry tons and tons and tons of pollen on their legs, feed their broods. When the bees come, the birds come, everybody poos, right? That's the children's storybook, everybody poos. Chelsea, you're going to read that book soon. Everybody poos. All right, so we want to plant insectary plants that help do that. And so how does the food forest movement work? Well, you are a land steward. You say to me, yes, Maciek, I want a food forest, or I want to improve one. These are the kinds of trees I want. We go out, we map it. I create a flyer. We promote it. The landowner or land steward provides the trees. I might help them source them or get giant piles of wood chips to come in. And then whoever shows up on the day, that's who digs. And it's mutual aid. So all these workshops are free. You help me, I help you. We don't track. I track to the nearest quarter day just so that if we ever apply for a grant, we can say, hey, this is how much participation we've had. But we don't say, you haven't done enough. You haven't come to enough workshops. So we're not going to do a workshop at your place. We don't do that. Okay. Time 4:30. Good. So we have, okay. I have a very long list of, by the way, the best way to get all this information, because I did not bring enough photocopies, is to get your name on this list, and I can send you everything electronically. I'm an educator. I don't, make people pay for my handouts. I create them naturally. So here's what I'm going to do. We're not going to go through all this. I'm going to talk about some of the limiting factors, and then you tell me which ones you want to hear about the most, and we'll talk about them. Water is obviously the most limiting factor in our area. Bare soil, bad. Heat, right? Bare soil attracts the sun, heats that soil up, and water evaporates. We have both hot summers and cold winters. That's a challenge. Wind. When you get wind, you get evaporation. It's basic physics. The faster the wind flows over a surface, the faster water evaporates. Clay soils. I'm going to pass around. This is soil from my current place. A jar test. I highly recommend you do this if you haven't done it yet. You fill a jar halfway with water, with soil, fill it up with water, shake it, and let it sit for 24 hours. And what you'll get is you will see this. The bigger particles will fall to the bottom like sand, and the smaller particles like clay are at the top. So sand, silt, clay. Even silt is actually microscopic. You can't see those particles with the naked eye, but you will get an idea of what you're working with here. So if we could pass this around, but try not to shake it as you're doing it, because we want to be able to see this profile. which is why there's a sticky note on it that says handle gently. Okay, clay soils. Folks, when you have clay soils, roots can't penetrate, water doesn't percolate. There are all kinds of problems associated with that. High pH. Iron is unavailable chemically when your pH is higher than about 7.5. Okay. High UV, you're going to pick species to deal with that. Hail, flood events. Sometimes we have too much water. Low organic matter and fertility. How are we going to deal with that? A lack of shade. How are we going to deal with that? A lack of diversity. How are we going to deal with that? Herbivory. We have herbivores. We have mammals, songbirds, infections of all different kinds. Tools and equipment. I brought these specifically to show you that not all sprinklers are created equal. Okay, some of them have plastic components that just fall apart. I really like this one. It's the third one I've tried, best one so far. Late frost, how are we going to deal with late frost? Pruning, how do we shape trees and prune them to get them to the shape that we want them? Please don't feel guilty that we're hurting trees by pruning and shaping trees. We have had experience and a symbiotic relationship with fruit trees for thousands of years. There used to be 16,000 documented varieties of apples in North America alone. And they're native to eastern Kazakhstan and western China. So we have a long relationship. It's give and take. What if you're going to nurse before planting? And we're not talking just about trees. We're also talking about shrubs and herbaceous perennials, support perennials, and so on. And what do we deal with? How do we deal with invasives? I have a Taos Tough perennials for polycultures list. Trees are on this column, shrubs in this column, perennials in this column. I have a few paper copies which I can give you. The super drought tolerant ones have asterisks on them. The ones with carrots on them are also nitrogen fixers. I've got a few on the bottom that are honorable mention or unverified good candidates, things that I'm currently experimenting with that we'd like to see if they can hang or not. And I think that's it. So, what do I want people to hear about? Talk to me. Water? Oh, well, we can start. Here was my vision. Tell me what it is that you want to hear about, and I will go through some of this information, and then we can follow up on questions with that. What do you want to hear about?
Is this mainly for apples, or is it for all fruit?
So the idea of a food forest is we have a large mix. The question was, is this mainly for apples? Apples are my favorite. I did a calculation. Corn, onions, potatoes, apples is on that list, maximum number of calories per acre. It is crazy. That's what a food forest is. So let's define a guild for any. The question was, what's a guild? And the idea of a guild is simply that you have a large mixture of different plants growing in either in the same group of trees or under a single tree. And I have a document here called the Food Forest Overview. As a matter of fact, I'll pass this around. On the back side is a schematic diagram of the kinds of plants that you want to plant underneath every tree if possible. You want a nitrogen fixer, you want an insectary, you want something to attract insects, you want something to create mulch for you, either green, living, or brown. You want a mineral miner, you want something with a taproot that's going to go down and grab minerals from below the subsoil, be incorporated into the leaves. Those leaves die and they rot. And then the critters come to the feast and spread those minerals all along. And then you want an aromatic pest confuser, especially onions. I recommend you plant either chives or walking onions or leeks or something like that underneath every darn tree. Keep those insects guessing. Okay. So the guild is fundamental to the idea of a food forest, and the holistic orchard has a picture of, thank you, sir, of a guild and a single pear tree. And I had been exposed to permaculture in the past. And I saw this photo in this book of this pear tree with like 5 different perennials, and my head exploded. I was like, that's it. If you've taken a single biology class, especially as an adult when your brain was probably a little more open to these things, you realize biodiversity is the name of the game. And so the guild concept does that. This book, Integrated Forest Gardening, has 15 different case studies. They're beautifully computer generated diagrams of, and a list of species, exact placement done by Dan Halsey and his crew. Amazing to give you an idea of the huge variety of geometries and shapes of your design of your food forest. It could have a fence involved. It could be symmetrical. It could be asymmetrical. Sky's the limit, y'all. It's wild. Okay. All right. What else do we want to hear about? Yes, sir, in the back.
Have you ever incorporated SLV systems into food forests?
I haven't, but you can. An espalier is simply typically a dwarf apple or pear tree whose rootstock cannot handle the weight of the fruit itself. And so you would set up a series of wires like you would for the vines of a grape, and then you would train the branches to go sideways. In colder climates, those are going to work really well next to a masonry wall, right? So it was mentioned at the beginning, part of my qualifications is an amateur passive solar designer. It's amazing how much heat is stored in a masonry wall, whether it's rock or concrete. It doesn't matter. If you place a tree in the right spot and that wall radiates its heat out overnight, you can keep trees that normally would not be happy very happy. So yeah, sky's the limit. And you could still plant grapes next to it and have a polyculture. Nothing wrong with that. Yes, sir.
Two questions. One, to follow up on what you just said, how close would you build a masonry wall to a fruit tree that's how close does it need to be effective? One. And then two, also different question. I'm dealing with a terribly invasive grass that I'm pretty sure is called couch grass. What would you suggest about invasive grasses, generally speaking?
With invasive grasses, I'm just going to say plant competition. Find something that can grow up and over. If you're going to fight grasses by digging and pulling out, my co-parent did that underneath a box elder tree, and we literally have a lawn underneath that tree because it's a box elder. It's 30 feet tall. It's really good at providing shade, and so we reseeded it. But she spent 3 months digging down 18 inches and pulling out every damn root. So, okay, permaculture can be done fast, easy, and cheap. Pick any two. Right? Pick any two. If you're willing to work hard, it can be cheap and it can be fast. Going back to what was the other question about how close? Okay, this is how I'm going to answer that question. When you get trees that you're not ready to plant in, what you can do is called healing in. That means you place the tree on the side. And when you heal in a tree, there's going to be some dirt. So here is the ground, here is the tree that you've healed in, here's the root system of that tree. But you know what? There's a place of contact between the tree itself and the ground. And this ground right here is, unless it's covered in grass, you've just dug it in. So you messed it up with a shovel, right? This gets hot right here. And I have damaged this part of a rootstock of a tree because I left it too close to that hot surface. So what I do now is I put a block of wood, cheap little, whatever, leftover block of wood, and to keep a little bit of separation between that tree and the ground. So I would say the same applies to the espalier situation. You don't want the trunk of the tree is not designed to be exposed to extreme heat. It wants gentleness. That's, I don't know, 6 inches, a foot. I wouldn't go closer than 6 inches, especially depending on whether you're in Tucson or you're in Salida. Okay. What else do people want to hear about? Yes? And then you, sir. And then who else?
Oh, I had two things. One, to do proper tree planting, there's a lot of great resources on CSU Extension, or reach out to the Master's Gardeners program. And then number two, I know grapes grow great over by like Taos area and stuff. But I've heard up here in the valley, grapes don't do as well. Is there any truth to that, or is it a like special species of grapes?
Here's my experience. Grapes like crappy soil. And they like sandy soil. They don't need a lot of water, but they need it regularly. So if you're growing in really clayey soils where that water doesn't percolate well and it's growing in very dense soils, those roots are not going to have an easy time going sideways. So I would probably prep the soil in advance by adding a lot of wood chips. You may even go 50-50. Go nuts. A mile from my house is Medina & Sons concrete factory where they sell pumice. If I go and I load it myself, I can buy a bucket of white pumice that's pea gravel size for $1.50 a piece. So find ways to loosen up the soil, to aerate it, throw in some biochar, something to create some porosity. I've never grown a carrot in my life, but I've talked to annual gardeners, and that soil needs to be fluffy. Otherwise, that carrot simply cannot drill down. It needs some substrate that it can manage. Yes, ma'am.
Build roofs to tilt to northeast or west.
Say it again. Thanks.
Build roofs to tilt to northeast, west.
Let's do this. Thank you, ma'am. Let's just go down the water deal because this is like the number one most important thing. Folks, and I'll get to the build roofs, but let's start at the top. Folks, there's 7 sources of water, más o menos. Rain from the sky, an acequia or ditch, fantastic. A well, great. You can sprinkler. You can use hand watering. You can use drip. You can use a Circo hose. Roof catchment. You can catch that catchment, you can catch that and put it in a cistern, or you can not have a gutter at all and have it just land onto a perennial bed. Okay? Cisterns are sexy and expensive, but the cheapest way to store roof catchment water is in a perennial bed. For every 1% of organic matter increase, so let's say from 2% crappy soil to 3% much better soil, you can store an extra 50 gallons per 100 square feet. 100 square feet is 10 feet by 10 feet. 50 gallons will be stored in the fluffy, fibrous, organic nature of the soil that you're building. So everything you can do to increase organic matter by using biology, not by necessarily buying it, although I suppose you could, you can do that. Okay. Build roofs to tilt to the north, to the east, or west. If right now that's west, so south is this way. If you have a roof that's tilted this way and it rains, that water's landing on the southern side of your house. If you want to grow San Pedro or some other cactus, go for it. If you want to grow other stuff, I would tilt that roof in the opposite direction and have it land on the north side of your house or on the east side, because it's not going to evaporate. And so when I as a permaculture designer, when I go to people's land and I consult and I do an assessment, it takes me typically about 2 hours. I'm reading the landscape and I'm looking at, hey, where are the weeds growing the tallest? It very often happens on the north and on the east side of buildings or trees. Note, if you know you're going to plan new trees or new buildings, that's a future growing area. As soon as you create windbreaking, you create afternoon shade relief, you've got a new growing area because you know the water's going to stick around because the sun is not going to hit it directly. Folks, irrigate at night whenever you can, or early in the morning. Avoid a windy days. If it's a windy day, just don't irrigate. Just wait until that wind comes down. I use wunderground.com because it has graphs. And I'm a chemistry guy, and I love graphs. And it can tell me, hey, that there's going to be a peak. The tilted slope is going to be about 11 o'clock. Okay, so I need to be done with what I'm doing at about 10. It's going to go, and then about 5 o'clock, it's going to start going down. But it's not really going to quit going down until about 6. Okay, so about 6:30, I can put on a sprinkler, and I can put on for 2 hours, and I'm not throwing water into the atmosphere. Come on, baby. Escape, thank you. Double click? Double click. It takes, how many permaculturalists does it take to operate a computer? Okay. Choose delivery wisely, whether you're using drip or sprinkler type. Did I bring the other sprinkler type? Oh, damn it. I forgot. The way I did my currently, my newest, I got it. The way I did my newest orchard was I used one of these cast iron sprinklers. And folks, I know I'm coming from a place of privilege, but if you can buy brass plumbing for your water hydrants. These tees are stackable. They come from a company called Ely. And I had 6 of them. I have 3 of these, which means I had 6 zones. And I spread hoses into 6 directions, and every one of those had one of these. Why do I use the cast iron? Because they're heavy and they tend not to flip and change their position after you've set them. So, when you take the total pressure coming from my well and you split it 6 ways, I was only getting about 6 or 7 feet in diameter of water, which, considering I had set up these tree basins in advance and torn up the soil with my BCS, and which is a fancy walk-behind tractor, and added wood chips and cover crop and had a downhill berm on the downhill side. It was perfect. I would do 2 hours at a time. I had a flag system. Folks, flags at Ace Hardware are $13.99 plus tax for 100 flags. You can have a pink set, you can have a blue set, you can have a white set, and you can mark the stuff in your garden like what goes where. I have a system. Double flags mean something different than a single flag. So, and I would know each set of these trees, did it get watered in the last cycle or not? As soon as it did, I would flip the flag, move the damn hose into a different spot. And after 9, we had 54 trees planted in the fall. So 6 times 9 is 54. So in 9 rounds, everybody got water. And then I would start the cycle over again. And I would only give 2 hours of water time, sometimes even 1 hour of water at a time. Sometimes 45 minutes. So, if this summer's going to be really dry, I will use a lot less. Right now, I'm using sprinklers because I've finally filled in the spaces between the original trees, and I have cover crop growing everywhere. If water gets tight, we're just going to be watering the trees. We're not going to be watering the cover crop. So using plant tap-rooted species, comfrey, burdock. I know annual gardeners are going to scream at me. Burdock's amazing. Burdock produces leaves. I have leaves right now that are this big after a really crappy winter. Sandfoin, lovage, anything that's taprooted is really going to drill down and get water from up top. And earthworks, folks, this is the book. Brad Lancaster's book. There's a chapter on check dams. There's a chapter on swales. There's a chapter on French drains. There's a chapter on Berman Basin, which was the very first picture I showed you. There's a chapter on everything. You don't even have to read it all. There's so many damn good photos in this. You can learn just by reading the diagrams. Seriously, it's amazing. You need volume 2. Forget volume 1. It's an introduction. Okay, I'm here. I'm getting the signal to wrap it up. So if you want this complete list and or the Taos Tough list and or the food forest overview, or you want to look at anything else, just sign up. I will send you the stuff electronically. You can bug me anytime you like. Any other dying questions? It's doable. Your species are going to be different depending on where you live. So species selection is a part of this whole gig. So if you're going to learn botany, Botany in a Day by Tom Elpel, this is an essential reference. If you're going to do plants, Botany in a Day is key. Lots of medicinal information here. Tells you what belongs to what family, what similar characteristics, blah, blah, blah. Yes, sir.
Oh, wait. Yeah, one question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going to be really fast. Since you brought up species, how much or at all do you prioritize native species in your local projects?
I don't, because I'm a gray hair. And it's like I have a limited amount of time. I need stuff to go fast. If you remember, fast, easy, cheap, pick any two. So if you have time and you want to go native species, great. Do I have native species I'm about to plant? Oh, yeah. Winter fat. I just got from the forestry department a golden currant. Is golden currant as tasty as black currant? No. Is it tougher? Yes. So yeah, I'm going to plant it. Thanks for asking. Mixture. I'm a mixture guy.
Natives, you go to buy natives, you would go to your local, what did you say, forest?
So many sources. The New Mexico Forestry Department has a seedling program where you can buy lots of 49 seedlings for $2 a piece, but you got to buy 49 of them. So that's $100 shot. You got to either pick it up or have it shipped to you or whatever. Yeah. Or you can afford to go to your good nurseries, or you talk to your friends, or Native Plant Society. I see there's a Colorado Native Plant Society. Any source you can. Yes, sir.
Right there.
I just wanted to point out for everybody that we have 3 sunken Gruben culture beds on Joyful Journey property, and the fruit trees behind the hotel. At one point, I was starting to get a guild going, but there's the fruit trees. There's, I think there's creeping onion, and I don't know if the comfrey's still there. The comfrey's still here by the yurts, but
I've seen
some
the
of this,
comfrey, yeah.
some of this base is already here. So if you want to check it out in person, some of it's here, not all of it.
Yeah, just go for it. Talk to your friends. Social permaculture, learn from other people. Ask the locals. The locals know, especially the older ones, the viejos, the viejas. I don't care what culture they're from. Ask them questions because they will know what works and what doesn't.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So much fun.